Hey everyone, welcome to another Patreon topic video. This one is for Plasmo, and the subject is the importance of supporting each other. So the importance of players supporting other players, content makers supporting other content makers, or even just supporting the genre itself at this point, right? Indie devs, all that kind of stuff. So why is this important? And, as sweet and snuggly and cute as this topic sounds, let's all play the ukulele and sing songs together. I actually think this will be one of the more spicy, controversial topic videos that I make, because I have a lot of things to say that I think are wrong, that need to be improved. And in the past, and also very recently, when I bring these topics up, I've gotten a lot of pushback. I've been, people don't like to hear this stuff. They just like to dismiss it, say I'm being too harsh, that I don't actually understand, that I'm being foolish, that I'm being idealistic, name your adjective. But I feel like at this point, there's just going to come a split. I feel like the lay of the land right now is that there's one group that want to stay firmly how things are now, Twin Galaxies style, we've been here forever, this is how things are, this is how things are done, this is how they will continue to be done. And really, any other type of thing is not only not going to work, but it's kind of shameful, it's pathetic. And then there's going to be my side, the direction I'm going, where I think we need to start investing in the future of this genre. We need to start thinking forward instead of thinking back all the time. Instead of thinking in the past. We need to start thinking of the future. How are we going to move this moving forward, basically, right? And so a lot of what I'm going to address and talk about in this video is from my perspective of trying to make this genre more accessible, more interesting, more popular, less niche, basically. But if you're a viewer who just wants to remain niche forever, a lot of this is going to be lost on you. So I'm just letting you all know ahead of time. So anyway, so why do I think support is so important? Well, I think right now there's sort of this attitude, this underlying attitude, that Shmups will become popular only through some sort of external force coming in and rescuing us, basically. Whenever you talk about how can Shmups become more popular, what can we do to make this genre catch on more? Most people say, some developer needs to make some insane shmup that just blows people's minds, and that will get people converted, like Cuphead or something like that, but way better and way more mainstream appeal. Or they'll say, maybe, famous YouTubers need to start playing shmups and talking about them. And so there's always kind of this focus on external things that could improve the genre popularity, when really, to me, I think a lot of it needs to begin internally, within our own scene, within our own fandom. Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is that, and I've watched this and tracked this since starting the podcast especially, and starting my channel and all the discords and all that stuff, I've really watched this very closely and tracked it, is that we actually get a fairly, not regular, but somewhat regular flux of new players on a somewhat regular basis, but we lose them. We're constantly losing them. I have lists in my brain of 30 or 40 or 50 players who joined after me, were hyped up about the genre for a few weeks and left. And I remember them, and I'm like, oh, what happened to these people? They just left. One of them was a somewhat, not well-known, but a somewhat influential Melee player, and I ended up playing Melee against him and stuff. I was like, oh, this is cool, and maybe we can work together and bring people into Shmups. Dude just peaced out, right? It just happens. People show up, they're interested in the genre for a few weeks, up to a few months, and then they move on. This happens over and over and over. And sometimes I take it a little bit, not personally, but sometimes it hits me more than others, because some of these people can be fans of the show. they can get really into the podcast and get really into my content or into the genre, and then they're like, no, I'm done with this. And a lot of it is stuff, it's just the inaccessibility and the lack of support. So let's start with that. So the first thing we really need to start improving on is supporting the new players. I'm going to say this a lot and you guys are going to get tired of it, but it's because it's true. And so how we kind of treat new players is when they first walk through the door or whatever, first come into contact with us, we're actually pretty good about that stage. We're like, oh crap, someone new, shiny new toy, let's talk to them, let's tell them all about this and that. So that's okay. We're pretty good about that. But then about 2 or 3 weeks in, we're just kind of done with them, it's like, okay, we get you, you're not like an amazing prodigy player or anything like that, so yeah, we basically drop them. And I actually remember KZ telling me this in my own Discord. He's like, no one cares. And I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, you're right, KZ. He was saying, KZ ended up sticking around, but I remember at the time he was saying, like, no one cares about anything other than, the top score players. And that's very true. We really don't invest in the new players at all. Basically, we check to see, are you oddly gifted? Are you oddly good? And if you are, we're like, okay, like Kiwi and Moglar, okay, you're in the club, we can accept you or pay attention to you. If you're not, we just kind of, get out of the way. And so, and this happens over and over. So that's one thing we need to work on, is we need to somehow start supporting players in their kind of a transitionary stage, right? When they're trying to learn the game, and they get a 1-all. It's like, who cares? It's a 1-all. Well, I can tell you from my experience, a 1-all meant a lot to me when I got it. And so if no one cares, whatever. And I think also for me, I'm as invested in the genre as I am because I basically talked about it on my podcast all the time. And so people became invested mostly because I just talked about it a bunch. And they're like, oh, okay, I kind of know about Mark and stuff like that. But not everyone's going to show up and dedicate hundreds of hours of building up a podcast, right? And so I just want us to begin by supporting players in their transitionary stages, not just when they first show up and then ignore them. So that's something we need to improve. Another thing we need to definitely improve is sharing stuff to as many people as we can. It's hard to explain the concept, but sharing things and celebrating things. So for instance, someone let's say Violet Hat Purple gets the second Western DOJ white label clear that he's been working on for a year and a half. He posts about it on Twitter, and like 8 people reply, like maybe even a retweet or whatever, like a small group of people pay attention, and everyone else just kind of ignores it. And I honestly don't know why. I can't explain why to this day. Why are we ignoring the things we, on a constant basis, say, this is important to us? We value people playing for score. Playing for score is so important. And yet, when our players post the stuff, no one really cares. Whereas when you look at other scenes and stuff, this is an issue overall, but it's kind of odd for us because we're so small. It's not like we have this massive group of people we need to reach out to. And I know a lot of people are seeing this stuff and just ignoring it. They're like, oh, well, it's just another day in the office, basically. And, when I talk to players about this, too, a lot of players say, well, I don't care. I don't care if players talk about my scores or share my scores. Well, it really shouldn't matter if you care or not. It should matter. It should be a function of the scene to support what we act like we care about, right? It shouldn't matter if the individual player doesn't care or not. For instance, if it's high tier enough, we'll start to care, right? If some Western player gets a well, I don't know if that's exactly true either, right? But usually the higher the scores or whatever, the more we might get invested in it. But still, I think even that's starting to slip. Like, how many people really cared that much about Plasmo's Pink Sweets world record and his special demonstrations. I remember when that came out, like barely anyone checked it out. And we just need to start getting better about this sort of thing. And I've just noticed as a content creator too, it is basically impossible to get off the ground in Shmups as a content maker. And I know what everyone's saying, and everyone's going to say, well, it's because the genre's so niche. I don't think that's totally the case. I think it's also because as a scene, as a group, we are awful about supporting our content makers. There is absolutely no expectation or infrastructure to support stuff. And so I'm going to refer to the FGC here. People, this annoys people, but the FGC is way better about this, especially Melee back in the day. Like, the more, the influential, I've learned about so much stuff about Melee because the influential people in Melee always promoted projects people were working on. They'd say, oh, 20XX is out. Check out 20XX. This is out. Check them out. This guy's out. Check him out. They would be constantly pushing people working on stuff and constantly pushing content makers. Like, you know, they were just really, that's just an expectation within Melee that you, well, it was, I don't know if it is anymore now that the scene got so big and everything, but there was a time where that was an expectation where you would do that. In Shmups, that is not an expectation whatsoever. Basically, I promote all my own content to this day, and actually the people who promote my content the most, outside, you know, the Shmup homies that I've basically befriended, right? But outside of them, the people who promote my stuff the most are like my casual fans. They're honestly way better about that than dedicated Shmup players. I don't know, maybe it's because people don't like my stuff or whatever it is, but I've seen that over and over, not just with my stuff. Everyone loves STG Weekly, right? We're all about STG Weekly. You ask a Shmup player, you know, what's Shmup content you love? Every single one is basically going to say STG Weekly. And yet, when the new SCG Weekly episodes are coming out, they're not getting any more attention or support than my own stuff, basically. Everyone just kind of ignores them as well. You know, so it's definitely a wider issue than just me, and then it's basically impossible for newer people to break in. Like Bofner, he came out with this really cool Darius Gaiden video, I think, last year, and you know, he's been putting out other Shmup content, and I think he's, you know, the dude's got potential and talent, and I like his videos, and I always try and support them and put them out there. No one else pays attention to them whatsoever, and you know, I don't know what the issue is, to be honest. Maybe that people in the comments can enlighten me a little bit, but maybe it's people feel, I think it's just kind of also a bit of a bystander effect, right? Where everyone feels like someone's going to support that, so I don't have to. Maybe everyone thinks Mark will support that, so I don't have to. I don't know what it is, but I think if we start having a more shared responsibility where each individual person, and you don't have to be well known or anything like that. No one is really that well known within Shmups. And I think you guys would be surprised how far, like I said, my casual fans are not well-known people. They're not even well-known within the scene. But they are getting my stuff out there a lot more effectively than like 80% of the established Shmup players I interact with on a daily basis. You know, so it's kind of a bizarre situation where it's almost like if you want to grow, you know, viewership, or you want to grow your influence within the genre or reach new people, basically, you need to go outside the genre to do it. It's bizarre. And so I think if Shmup players start taking a little bit more of a forward-looking attitude that this stuff matters if you want to grow the scene, it's not going to magically one day some outsider is going to swoop in and do it, right? The closest you get to that is Gus going out there in basically solo mode and single-handedly basically growing the genre himself with barely any support. And so, yeah, and he said that himself. I'm not just projecting. And so that's something we really need to work on if we want to improve. If we don't want to improve, continue to do nothing, I guess, right? You don't have to change in any way. And yeah, so I'm sure this video is gonna rifle many feathers, but I think it's important to be said. So thanks for watching. And speaking of support, right, let me talk about my supporters, right? My Patreon supporters. Dingo, Anthony A, Ben Wynn, Brian Shiver, Double Vision, Dunpeel 2064, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Gus, Kiwi, Jacob Spring, Jake Ryan, Joe Angelo, John, K, Kinotosi, Quentin, Mark Sloan, Maz, Nathaniel Davis, N Electron, Okla Kugels, Omcall, Psych, Rhizosis, Sugumo, Plasmo, Young Money Sui, and Yutakaya. Thanks for watching.